Hey, Internet. How's it going? Today, I want to talk about animations. Specifically, we're going to make a pulse animation in four different ways. It's going to be the same animation. I'll show you that right now. This one right here. And yeah, we're going to look at it four different ways, which I will show on the agenda. We got our demo, that's already done. Then we're going to do the Webflow page setup. I'll do the interaction in Webflow first. Then we'll do CSS Keyframes. Then we'll do CSS Transitions with a little bit of JavaScript to add and remove classes. And then we'll finally look at GSAP, which is an animation library that's freely available. Lastly, I'll talk about the pros and cons of each. Hopefully, that won't take too long. It kind of gets down the rabbit hole there. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. As you know, I like to start with a blank project. So I have a blank project in Webflow here. Call this page wrapper. All I'm going to do is set overflow to hidden so that if the animation expands beyond the page limits, it doesn't introduce any unwanted scroll into our project. Within page wrapper, just do another wrap class for lack of a better name. This is going to control the height and essentially the layout. So we have wrap 100 viewport heights. We'll set the width to 100%. And then display, we're going to set to flex. Horizontal, we want everything aligned to center. And then we want to justify with space around. This is going to control how our pulse animations sit. Let's go ahead and start building one of the pulse animations. We'll call this pulse wrap. Pulse wrap, I'm just going to hard code the width and height here to 6 rem. I'm going to set the position to relative. And then everything inside we want it to sit in the middle. So we'll just do a flex center center. And then we're going to add two children to that. The first one, we'll add pulse circle. Pulse circle, we will just give it a width of 100% of its parent, height of 100% of the parent. Position, we want absolute. And so we can see what we're doing here. Let's give it a nice orange color. All right. Oh, let's make it a circle. So 100 viewport width for the border radius. And now let's add a ring. Pulse ring. We want this, let's say a 5 pixel border radius. Color is black. 100 viewport width. Then we need to give it a width and height. If I give it 12 rem by 12 rem, you'll be able to see it. It's squished there because we need to set position to absolute. So now it's removed from the document flow. It's good to go. 12 rem by 12 rem, and we're just going to really animate the width and height properties here is how we're going to control it. So I'll leave it there for now. Da, da, da. We can go ahead. Yeah, let's just go ahead and build it in Webflow right now. So I've got that. I'm going to select page wrapper. I'm going to do a page trigger on page load. We want to do when the page finishes loading. We're going to start an animation. Let me delete all of these little tests that I was working on. Call this pulse. I'm going to add an action. First thing I want to do is I want to set the ring size initial state. So we've got pulse ring, and I'm going to set the something I noticed. Well, you'll see this as we move through, but the ring's going to be on top. So we'll set size to 0 rem by 0 rem. Set as initial state. Opacity, we want that to start at 100% as initial state. You notice how it's sitting on top right now? We don't want that. So we'll just move this up so that it renders before the circle. Okay, back into our animation here. Let's get the pulse ring. And we want to set the size. Let's do something like 20 rem by 20 rem. We'll make it take 2 seconds and we'll do an out court. And then we also want to affect the opacity. We want to drive that to 0%. And I like that on an ease, not ease in, on an ease. That also needs to take 2 seconds. And let's check out our animation. So there we go. We've got one pulse. Now, unfortunately, we can't just go in, press a loop, and then preview and have it work. We have to reset the animation properties. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Won't take long at all. We will first set the size back to 0 rem by 0 rem. And this we want to take 0 seconds. We want it to happen instantaneously. And then with opacity, we're going to reset that to 100%. Again, 0 seconds. And we can save. And now if we preview with loop on, it should loop for us. There we go. So that's looking good. Something that is interesting, just a quick little touch point. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. Now, if I go into preview, we're going to be able to see our animation. If I wanted this to affect every little pulse kind of circle that we made, we can go back into our animation on here, and rather than selected element, we can change that to class. And let's go ahead and save. And now if I preview, it affects both, and we could add as many of these as we wanted. So that's kind of just a cool little tidbit to save you some time, hopefully. I'm going to go ahead for now, put this back on selected element because I'm going to build this one a different way. What did we have next? Next we have CSS Keyframes. All right. So to do this one, I'm going to add a custom embed. I believe you do need a paid Webflow account for this. And let's call it CSS Keyframe. This is okay, but before I do that, I need style tags. So we're just going to write some inline CSS here. And I'm going to set an ID called CSS animation. Actually, I feel like that's a little confusing. We'll call this example 2. And in order to target that, we need to actually give it a name. So this pulse ring, we're just going to give it an ID of example 2. And we'll go back to our embed. And what we'll do is I'm just going to make sure that I have some stuff up so that I don't screw this up. So we have animation name, we'll call it pulse. We want animation duration, say 2 seconds, and then animation iteration count set to infinite. Okay, and now we need to define that animation called pulse. So we're going to do @keyframes pulse, open and close some brackets. Actually, we need to close the brackets here, and we'll delete this last one. We're just going direct in Webflow here. That's fine. And at 0%, which means the start of the animation, we want our width to be 0 rem, our height to be 0 rem, and our opacity to be 1. 100%, so the end of our animation, we want width to be 20 rem, height to be 20 rem, and opacity to be 0. Let's go ahead and save and close that. And now you can see our animation's already happening right here in the designer, which is kind of cool. This is the only method which will let you preview the animation right in the designer, not even with preview or preview for Webflow interactions. All right. So let's go ahead. I think I'm ready to move on to the next one. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. However, I don't want it to animate like this. So let's call this example 3. We'll give it an ID. You'll notice that animation stops. And we're going to do CSS transitions for this one. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to set the, let's see, I'm going to just give this a combo class of 3, just so that I don't affect the other elements. And we'll set the initial width and heights to 0. And just going to hard code, make sure that the opacity is set at 100%. And then we'll give another class, a combo class called finish, where we want 20 rem by 20 rem, and the opacity be 0%. Now, what we want to do is we're going to write some JavaScript to add the class of finish and then remove it every 2 seconds. If I go to code sandbox, let's go ahead and start a new sandbox, make it static, and we're going to add a new file called index.js, console.log, loaded. I'm going to grab the code sandbox address there. We got to go into Webflow. We need to add that in script tags. Script source is that. And then don't forget the file name. I always forget the file name there. Okay, we're going to save that. And then we also, let's see. So we have this class of finish. We're going to go ahead and remove that to start because we want it to start from its initial state. And then do we have an ID on the ring? Yes, it's example 3. And so I'm going to go ahead and publish this. Now that it's published, let's go ahead and open it. Great. We have our 2 animations here, but this one's not animating yet. Let's make sure that this is actually loaded. I'm going to go ahead and drag this over here so I don't get confused. We go to console, we say loaded, so we know our script is running. So that's good. Now the first thing we want to do is we're going to get a reference to that HTML element. So we'll write const ring3 equals document dot query selector. And then we're going to select by the ID, which we know is example 3. And now to that, we want to class list. Oh, sorry. We need to say ring3 dot class list dot add. And we're going to add that class of finish. Notice you don't have to put a period or anything here because it already knows it's adding a class. We'll go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and reload the page and see if it animates for us. Not animating. That's a bummer. Let's see. So we're able to get our ring 3. It's already added it. It looks like, you know what we need to do is we did not apply transitions to our pulse ring. So let's go ahead and select that. And we'll go down to transitions. This is very key to making it work. So we want the opacity to happen over 2 seconds. And we wanted that to be on an ease. And we also want to set the width transition 2 seconds. We want that on something, I want it to ramp up fast. Not an ease out, let's do ease out quint. That's pretty nice. It's going to start fast. And we'll do the same with the height. Where's height? There it is. 2000 milliseconds. And choose that same easing function. Okay, we have to publish again. Go back, let's refresh. Okay, now we see our animation. So it only happens once. And I'm just going to close this because I keep accidentally clicking it. JavaScript has this set interval function, and it takes a function, a callback function that once the interval is complete, which will add 2000 milliseconds, then it's going to, let's say console.log interval. Save that and reload. And now in the console, you'll see every 2 seconds it'll log interval there. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to every 2 seconds remove that class of finish and then add it. So I'm just going to copy this line here and paste it again. We can say remove and add. Now this isn't going to work, which is a bummer. So it happens once, but we'll notice it doesn't happen again. Now this is because of the way JavaScript works, the event cycle and threading. I cannot intelligently explain why, but I can show you how to get around it. So let's do that. So we'll set a little timeout right here. This just makes sure that there's enough time for the class to actually get removed before we add it again. So that I guess the browser can recognize kind of what's actually going on. And we need to give this a parameter. We'll say something really small like 10 milliseconds. So save that. Now if we refresh, see it happens once. Does it happen again? It does not. Did I save? Set timeout, and we're adding. refresh once more. Hmm. Let's try setting this to 0. Well, one of my pros and cons I was going to talk about is when you do stuff on interval, this can get a little bit complicated, like this. I see something's going on. You can see it's a bit buggy. You know what's going on? I'm wondering if the transition timing that we gave it is what is causing the issue. So this takes 2000 milliseconds. Those are all taking 2000 milliseconds. Let's go ahead and have a quick look. So we can see it's removing and then adding, but it looks like it's not getting there fast enough because the transition. Something you could probably do is ring3 dot style. We have to essentially hard code the transitions back in here. So let's go ahead and abandon this strategy for now and keep moving on to the next one. This works really well for stuff like when you're clicking or other events, but for intervals, not the best. So you get to see my struggles. Congratulations. Let's do one more. Last, we're going to use GSAP. So to use GSAP, first we need the script. And we're going to just scroll down on the install page. And we just want we don't want any of the extra plugins or anything. We're going to get the minimum file. So we'll copy that. We need to plug this into Webflow. Going to put it above this one because this script right here is going to access the GSAP object. Okay, so we put the script in there. Now I'm not going to duplicate that one. I'm going to duplicate the first one. Duplicate, and that adds it at the end. I don't think I have any. Let's call this example 4. Give it the ID. And everything is looking good there. This one got rerouted. Move that over there so that everything is in its logical place. This was example 2. What happened to example 3? Did I not give it a... Hmm. Weird. Is this one example 3? That's why. Okay, drag that up there. Okay, now we are good to go. This should have... It's going to say already taken. Man, I confused myself here. What did I give example 4 to? Whoops. So example 4 goes to the ring. Still saying me. Let's just call it GSAP. Pulse ring. Okay. Looks like it has example 4. Sorry about that. Well, that's publishing. We can go ahead and start working with GSAP. We're going to use the GSAP from 2. So if we look, we have GSAP.from2. We have a selector. We have the initial state. And we have the final state. And we can set some other stuff like the easing and the duration. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to copy that. I'll copy this one. Come back here. And for this, we're going to look for, I'm actually just going to look for, yeah, we'll say example 4. And opacity, we want to set to 1. And then we wanted to set the width to 20 rem. and the height to 20 rem. Let me make this a little bit more visible. And we're going to go to opacity of 0. Let's copy paste this. Going to wrap this in quotes first. And this is the from, so it's actually starting from 0 rem. So we're going from opacity of 100% and width and height of 0 to opacity of 0, width and height of 20 rem. Duration we want to be 2 seconds. And I think we'll be fine with the default ease that GSAP uses. Let's go ahead and refresh here. Should have 4. Oh man, I screwed everything up. What did I do? I feel like it should be working now. Hmm. Did I add example 4 on this too? Yeah, that's why. So they did let me add example 4 there. So weird. Always waiting for the republish. Okay. And you'll see that only happened once. So we'll come in here and we can, I believe there's a repeat property. Yeah, repeat. And so use -1 to repeat infinitely. Save that, come back, refresh. And now it's infinite. One thing that's really cool about GSAP is we can create a stagger effect really easily. So let's say the way I'm targeting this is not going to work right now. So I'm going to delete this ID and we'll call this pulse ring and give it a combo class of GSAP. And I'm just going to paste 4 of them. And go ahead and publish that. And then back in our code, rather than targeting an ID of example 4, we'll target a class of GSAP. And we'll set a stagger to 0.2 seconds. And save that. This is done publishing. And when I reload, look, we get this really cool stagger effect. Um, yeah, anytime I'm doing stagger kind of, I reach for GSAP now. Okay, this concludes kind of everything I wanted to set up here. Let's go ahead and strike through. Now we can talk about some pros and cons. The so this is an Excalibur that I made earlier. I feel like I kind of arranged them in approachability. So Webflow being the most approachable, beginner friendly. The animation show in preview mode. You're already in Webflow, so you don't have to open up a code sandbox or do any custom editors or anything. The con to it is that you have limited properties available, and it's not platform agnostic. I can't just select a little bit of text. Anyways, so if I go back and we go to our Webflow animation, if I want to add, so these are kind of only the properties that we have access to animate. If I wanted to animate something like border radius, then I wouldn't be able to do that. So you're a little bit limited with Webflow there. CSS Keyframes, it loads in the designer. That's pretty nice to be able to see that. It's CSS, not JavaScript, so you don't have to actually load another JavaScript file. Like it's immediately going to be available in the browser. I think less than 1% of users actually disable JavaScript, so not too much to worry about there. But if let's see, actually, I want to go to sources. you'll see in my sources here, here I'm loading the, whatchamacallit, the code sandbox. Here, I'm loading jQuery. Webflow does that. Here, I'm loading GSAP. And then this is Webflow as well. So we're already loading some JavaScript. And if I go to network and I refresh, the scripts are not that big. In-page is actually the biggest one. This is something Webflow uses for in-page linking. But you see GSAP is pretty small, 25 kilobytes. The Webflow JavaScript is 53 kilobytes. So nothing too crazy there. I come back to Excalidraw. The downsides of CSS keyframes are that it's quite verbose. Like if I were to do stagger or some other things, I'd have to type in a lot more. There's some fancy ways you can do it with CSS properties or variable names and the delay. At that point, you're basically coding, which is fine. But there are also a lot of code snippets available online. Like if I search CSS keyframe pulse animation, then there's bunch of videos. You could just come here, directly copy paste what's going on. So a lot of people are using CSS keyframes animations. CSS transitions, you can preview it in the designer. And by that, what I mean is you can kind of, if I select the circle and I select pulse ring and I add finish, you can kind of see how uh, your animation is going to behave. Now, because it has that transition back when I remove the class of finish, I ended up not getting this to work. So it helps to understand events and set timeout and set interval if you want stuff to happen on intervals. I tend to use these only on like click interactions. And sometimes properties don't transition how I want them to. And so I put this as niche and I couldn't get it to work. So I used to use these a lot, but I'm finding myself using GSAP a lot more. Just because it's easier, faster. Yeah, and I really like it. And so GSAP, you do load a JavaScript file, though a lot of websites these days do use GSAP. So there's a good chance that you could have it, your client could already have it cached on their machine. There's a lot of, let's see, GSAP faster than, I already have it searched here. There's an interesting blog article. I mean, it's by GSAP, so of course they're gonna say that they win. But this, like, if you want to learn more about how animations work, this is a really good read. But they argue, this is kind of the verbosity of writing keyframes, whereas this is all it takes in GSAP to write that code. So this is a good argument for GSAP in this one. And they also say that they're available on more browsers than CSS, which is interesting. Downside is its code. So if you're not very comfortable in code, then it may be a lot harder than Webflow. It surprises me with how often it just works. And it's so easy to add like a stagger option, whereas almost all of these you'd have to kind of hand jam a lot more. And then if you want to change one little thing later, it's a lot harder as well. So GSAP definitely I like for more complex animations. Anytime I'm doing something pretty simple like a card wipe or an on hover interaction or something, then I tend to reach for Webflow interactions or CSS transitions. I don't use keyframes that often. If I'm going into keyframes, I'm probably just going to use a GSAP timeline. So that's kind of my overview there. Sorry I couldn't get number 3 to work like I did before, but just goes to show you where I'm at in my yeah. All right, thanks for watching. If this helped, please like and subscribe. That definitely helps me a lot. And that's all I got.